I worked day and night to pay our rent, but when I asked for help my mother said her stepchildren deserved comfort more than I did, and I stayed silent. Sarah was asleep when I left tonight. Our daughter Emma was curled next to her in our bed because the heat got shut off again. I couldn't look at either of their faces. I couldn't face what I'd become. Let me back. 6 months ago I was working 3 jobs to keep us afloat. Morning shift at the warehouse, afternoons delivering food, weekends doing handyman work. Sarah was home with Emma, trying to stretch every dollar until it screamed. We were drowning, but we were drowning together. That's when I called my mother. Mom, I'd ask, but we're gonna lose the apartment. The rent's behind, utilities are getting off. Emma's starting kindergarten next month, and we don't even have money for school supplies. Silence. Then that sigh. The one that meant I was being dramatic. Honey, no, money's tight for everyone right now. David just started his new job, and the twins need so much for their activities. Private school isn't cheap, they deserve to have the same opportunities as other kids. David, her husband of 2 years, his kids got horseback riding lessons while mine ate cereal for dinner. Mom, I'm not asking for a handout, I can pay back. I can't enable poor financial choices anymore, maybe this will teach to budget better. I hung. Sarah asked who it was. I lied and said wrong number. That lay was practice for what came next. A week later rent was 3 months behind. The eviction notice was taped to our door when I got home from my 16-hour shift. Emma was doing homework at the kitchen table, her pencil worn down to nothing. Sarah was at the stove making soup from a can we got from the food bank. Daddy, why does Mrs. Johnson next door have a pretty car and we don't? Emma asked without looking. Sarah and I locked eyes. We'd been having this conversation in whispers for months. How to explain poverty to a 5-year-old. How to tell them that some people matter more than others. I should have fought harder, should have begged my mother, should have swallowed my pride. Instead I started staying late at the delivery job. Told Sarah I was picking extra hours, I wasn't. I was sitting in my car in parking lots scrolling through old photos on my phone. Photos of my childhood bedroom that was bigger than our entire apartment. Photos of family vacations I thought were normal until I realized most families can't afford to fly anywhere. That's where I met Jessica. She ordered food to her office building every Tuesday night. Always tipped well. Always smiled when I handed her her order. Looked tired, she said one night. Long day. I should have said yes and left. Instead I started talking. About the eviction notice. About working too. About calling my mother and feeling like I was begging for scraps. Jessica listened. Actually listened. Didn't interrupt or sigh or tell me I was being dramatic. That sounds incredibly difficult. She said, her doing everything can for family. When's the last time someone said that to me? When's the last time Sarah looked at me like I was enough? The next Tuesday, Jessica asked if I wanted to come to her office. Just to talk, she said. She had coffee and it was warmer than sitting in my car. I knew what I was doing when I said yes. I knew what I was risking. But for the first time in months, someone was treating me like I mattered. Like I was more than just a paycheck that wasn't big enough. Her office had a view of the city. Floor to ceiling windows, expensive furniture, the kind of space that screamed success. Everything I couldn't give Sarah and Emma. No, Jessica said, pouring coffee from an actual coffee machine, not instant powder, but really thoughtful. Most delivery guys just drop the food and leave. She sat close to me on her leather couch. Closer than she needed to. My family doesn't appreciate how hard work. And there it was. The thing I'd been thinking but never said out loud. Sarah did appreciate me, I knew that. But appreciation doesn't buy groceries. And lately appreciation felt like all we had. Sarah's a good person. I said, but even as I said it, something twisted in my chest. It's just hard. Jessica put her hand on my arm. Deserve better than hard. I should have left right then. Should have remembered Emma doing homework with a worn down pencil. Should have thought about Sarah making miracles happen with food bank cans. Instead I leaned into the first gentle touch I'd felt in months. What happened next wasn't love. It wasn't even attraction really. It was desperation wearing a mask. It was the feeling of being wanted instead of needed. It was 15 minutes of pretending I was the kind of man who deserved leather couches and coffee machines and women who didn't count every penny. When it was over, I sat in my car for 2 hours. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. Em's asking when I'll be home. She wants to show her drawing. I drove home and hugged my daughter. Told Sarah I'd been busy with extra deliveries. She believed me because she trusted me. Because in 5 years of marriage, I'd never given her a reason not to. That night lying in our bed with the broken heater, listening to Emma cough in the next room, I made a decision. It was a one-time thing. A moment of weakness. Nobody would ever know and I'd never do it again. But secrets are like cancer. They start small and spread till they everything healthy around them. 2 weeks later Jessica texted me, said she'd been thinking about me, asked if I wanted to come by again. I stared at that text for an hour. Sarah was next to me asleep, her hand resting on my chest. Emma was in our bed again because her room was too cold. I typed back, hated. Things are complicated, Jessica. I understand. But if change mind, know where to find me. I deleted the conversation. But I couldn't delete the feeling. That someone out there thought I was worth wanting. Not just needing. Actually wanting. The eviction notice got extended. Sarah found a part-time job at a grocery store working nights so one of us could always be home with Emma. We were still drowning but we were swimming harder. My mother called on Emma's 6th birthday. Not to Emma happy birthday. She'd forgotten of course. I just wanted to let know David got promoted. We're taking the kids to Disney World next month. The twins are so excited. I hung without saying goodbye. That night I texted Jessica back. The second time was worse than the first because I couldn't pretend it was a mistake anymore. It was a choice. A conscious decision to betray the 2 people who loved me most in the world. The 3rd time, I stopped feeling guilty during. Started feeling guilty after. By the 4th time, I was planning when I could see her next. Sarah knew something was wrong. Started asking more questions. Where was I really going? Why was I coming home smelling like expensive soap instead of delivery truck exhaust? Or different. She said one night while we were washing dishes. Emma was coloring at the table humming a song from her favorite cartoon. Different how? Distant. Like her somewhere else even when her here. I should have confessed right then. Should have fallen to my knees and begged for forgiveness. Instead I made everything worse. I'm working 3 jobs to keep us from getting evicted and complaining that I'm distant. Sarah flinched like I'd slapped her. Emma stopped humming. I'm not complaining. I'm worried about us. There's nothing to worry about. Another lie. The biggest one yet. But lies compound interest just like debt, and I was about to learn that some bills come due all at once, with penalties that destroy everything thought built. The crash came 3 weeks later, on an ordinary Tuesday night that felt like the end of the world. The crash came on a Tuesday night that started like any other. I was supposed to meet Jessica at her office. Had already texted Sarah that I'd be late because of extra deliveries. Emma was at her friend's house for a sleepover. Sarah was working her shift at the grocery store. Everything was perfectly planned. That should have been my first warning. I was walking into Jessica's building when I saw Sarah's car in the parking garage. My heart stopped. Actually stopped. For a moment, I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't move. What was she doing here? Her job was across town. She should have been stocking shelves and dealing with angry customers, not sitting in her rusted Honda in the garage of the building where I was about to destroy our marriage. Again, I ducked behind a concrete pillar like a criminal, which is what I was, I guess, a thief stealing moments that belonged to my family and giving them to someone else. My phone buzzing. Sarah, where are? Emma's friend's mom called. Emma's throwing and wants to come home. I'm picking her but I can't reach. I stared at that text, crouched behind concrete like a coward. My 6-year-old daughter was sick and wanted her daddy, and I was hiding from my wife so I could sneak upstairs and betray them both. The shame hit me so hard I actually right there in the parking garage. I texted back, on my way home. Traffic is bad. Another lie, the 1000th lie. I ran to my car without looking back. Never saw Jessica again. Thought that meant something. Thought I could just stop and everything would go back to normal. I was wrong about everything. Emma had food. Spent 3 days home from school, curled on the couch asking me to read her stories and bring her crackers. Sarah took time off work. We couldn't afford to stay home with her. Those 3 days, taking care of our sick little girl, I convinced I'd learned my lesson. This was what mattered. This was real. Jessica was just a fantasy, an escape from reality that almost cost me everything. Sarah was different during those 3 days too, quieter. Watching me when she thought I wasn't looking. I told she was just tired from work and worry about Emma. I was wrong about that too. On Friday night, after Emma finally ate a full meal and went to bed, Sarah sat down across from me at our tiny kitchen table. The one we'd bought secondhand when we first moved in together. The one where we'd shared cheap takeout and big dreams. I need to tell something, she said. My turn to ice. Okay. Tuesday night when Emma got sick I tried calling for an hour before I texted. Phone went straight to voicemail. I nodded, trying to look confused instead of terrified. That's weird. Maybe the battery died. Sarah pulled out her phone. Opened an app I'd never seen before. I put a location tracker on phone 3 weeks ago. The world tilted sideways. Sarah, I can explain. Ken. Because according to this, spent 2 hours parked outside the Meridian office building on Tuesday. The same building visited 12 times in the past month. Always on Tuesday nights. Always when we're supposed to be working extra deliveries. I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. Couldn't do anything but stare at the evidence my betrayal glowing on her phone screen. Who is she? The question hung in the air like smoke. Like, Sar, Mercy. Emma stirred in the next room. Sarah lowered her voice but her eyes never left mine. I trusted. When came home smelling different. When started working late every Tuesday. When became someone I didn't recognize. I trusted because I loved. Because we promised each other we'd face everything together. Tears were streaming down her face, but her voice was steady. Strong, like she'd been practicing this conversation. I even called the delivery company. Asked if they knew why Tuesday routes were taking so long. Want to know what they said? I shook my head. They said haven't worked a Tuesday shift in 6 weeks. They said requested to have Tuesdays off because of a family obligation. Family obligation. The words tasted like ash in my mouth. Sarah, please let me explain. There's nothing to explain. Chose her. Over us, over Emma or everything we built together. She was wrong. I hadn't chosen Jessica. I'd chosen the feeling of being wanted instead of needed. I'd chosen 15 minutes of feeling like I mattered to someone who wasn't disappointed in me. But explaining that would have made it worse, not better. I ended it, I said. It's over. It meant nothing. Sarah's voice cracked. Our marriage meant nothing. Our daughter meant nothing. 6 years of building it together meant nothing. That's not what I meant. Then what did it mean? What could possibly mean that makes this okay? I had no answer. There wasn't one. Sarah stood, walked to the window, stared out at the parking lot where neighbors were coming home from honest jobs to families they hadn't betrayed. Emma asked me yesterday why I seemed sad all the time. She said without turning around. She wanted to know if it was her fault. If she'd done something wrong. That broke me. Completely shattered whatever was left of the man I thought I was. I'll do anything, I whispered. Counseling. I'll quit all my jobs and find new ones. I'll change completely. Just please don't take Emma away from me. Sarah turned around. Her face was calm now. Too calm. What? I want out. Tonight. Sarah, please. Tone engaged. Emma appeared in the doorway rubbing her eyes still pale from being sick. Mummy, why are yelling? Sarah's face transformed instantly. Became gentle and loving and everything I'd thrown away. Sorry, baby. Mommy and Daddy were just talking. Go back to bed. Is everything okay? Sarah looked at me. Really looked at me like she was seeing me for the first time. Or the last time. Everything's going to be fine, sweetheart. But Emma didn't move. She was 6, but kids know when their world is ending. Daddy are leaving. The question hit me like a physical. How to tell 6-year-old daughter that destroyed her family for someone whose last name don't even know. Daddy needs to go away for a little while. I managed. When are coming back? I looked at Sarah. She shook her head almost imperceptibly. I don't know, baby. Emma started crying. Not the dramatic tears of a child who didn't get her way. The quiet, desperate tears of someone world just cracked in half. I wanted to pick her. To hold her and promise her that everything would be okay. But Sarah stepped between us. Say goodbye to Daddy, Emma. He needs to go pack. The next hour was the longest of my throwing clothes into garbage bags while Emma sat on our bed watching. Not understanding why her daddy was leaving but understanding enough to know it was forever. Will still read me stories, she asked. Of course, every weekend. Another lie. I didn't know if Sarah would ever let me see Emma again. Didn't know if I deserved to. Will still be my daddy. That question broke something in me that I don't think will ever heal. Always Emma. No matter what happens, I will always be daddy. That part was true. The only true thing I'd said in months. I loaded my garbage bags into my car. Sarah stood in the doorway with Emma, both of them watching me leave. My daughter was still in her pajamas. The ones with the cartoon character she loved. Still pale from being sick. Still trusting that somehow, some way her daddy would make everything okay. I couldn't look back as I drove away. But I could see them in my rearview mirror, getting smaller and smaller until they disappeared completely. Just like everything else I'd ever loved, I drove to the cheapest motel I could find. Paid for one night with crumpled bills from my wallet. Sat on a bed that smelled like other people's mistakes and tried to figure out how I'd become the villain in my own daughter's story. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Heard left wife, wanna talk, Jessica. Somehow she'd gotten my personal number. I stared at that text for a long time. Here was the woman I'd destroyed my marriage for, offering comfort in my darkest moment. Offering to catch me as I fell from the I'd built with Sarah. 6 months ago I would have said yes. Would have run straight to her office building and let her convince me that this was fate. That Sarah and I were wrong for each other anyway. That sometimes have to everything down to find happiness. Instead, I blocked her number and my phone across the room, because I finally understood the truth that was gonna haunt me forever. I hadn't lost Sarah and Emma because of Jessica. I'd lost them because of me. And no amount of running towards someone else was going to change the fact that I was someone who abandons the people who need him most when things get hard. The kind of person who chooses 15 minutes of feeling wanted over 6 years of being loved. The kind of person who breaks promises to 6-year-olds and calls it complicated. I was going to have to live with that truth for the rest of my. And that was going to be punishment enough. It's been 8 months since that night. 8 months of living in motels and studio apartments that smell like failure. 8 months of seeing my daughter every other weekend, watching her learn to live without me. 8 months of understanding that some mistakes don't get fixed. They just get lived with. Emma doesn't cry when I pick her anymore. That should feel like progress but doesn't. She's polite now. Careful. Like I'm a stranger she has to be nice to because the adults said so. How was school this week, baby? Good. What did learn? Stuff. She used to tell me everything. Every friend's name, every game at recess, every song they sang in music class. Now she gives me one-word answers and stares out the window of my Honda like she's counting the minutes until she can go home. The place where I don't live anymore. Last weekend, she spent most of Saturday drawing pictures at the small table in my studio apartment. I thought maybe we were making progress. Maybe she was starting to feel comfortable here. Then I saw what she was drawing. 3 stick figures holding hands in front of a house. A mom, a dad and a little girl, all smiling, all together, but the dad figure was crossed out with thick black crayon marks. That's a beautiful picture. She looked at me with those big brown eyes that used to light when I came home from work. It's not finished, she said. I made a mistake. A mistake. That's what I am to my 6-year-old daughter now. A mistake that needs to be crossed out. Sarah doesn't talk to me unless it's about Emma. Custody exchanges happen in parking lots. Quick handoffs like deals. She's lost weight. Looks tired all the time. Works 2 jobs now because my child support barely covers groceries. I wanted to ask her once if she was okay. If she needed help. But what right do I have to care about her well-being when I'm the reason she's struggling? The divorce papers came last month. I signed them in the parking lot of a gas station, using the hood of my car as a desk. The pen kept skipping. Made me sign my name 3 times before it was dark enough to be legal. 6 years of marriage dissolved with a scratchy ballpoint pen and a notary who looked like she'd rather be anywhere else. My mother called the day the divorce was finalized. Not to check on me. Not to ask about Emma, to tell me she was disappointed. I raised better than this, she said. Sarah was good for. Emma needed stability. I know, Mom. Do. Because throwing away family for some office doesn't sound like know anything. Office. That's what Jessica had become in my mother's mind. Probably what she was in everyone's mind. The other woman. The homewrecker. The reason a little girl's daddy moved out. But that wasn't true. And we both knew it. It wasn't about her. I said it was about me. About the choices I made. Well, choices affected everyone. Emma asked me last week why her daddy doesn't love her anymore. The phone slipped out of my hand. Crashed on the concrete and cracked the screen. Just like everything else I touched lately. Emma thinks I don't love her. That's what I've done. Made my daughter believe she's not worth loving because her father is someone who abandons people when gets hard. I drove to Sarah's apartment that night. Our old apartment. The one we almost lost because I couldn't swallow my pride and begged my mother for help. The one where Emma took her first steps and learned to ride a bike in the hallway when it was too cold outside. Sarah answered the door in pajamas, looking exhausted. It's not weekend, she said. I know Emma thinks I don't love her. Sarah's expression softened slightly. The first in the wall she'd built between us. She's confused. This is hard for her. Can I talk to her? Just for 5 minutes. Sarah looked back into the apartment. I could hear the TV. Some cartoon Emma used to make me watch with her. Back when I was someone she wanted to spend time with. She's asleep. It took me 2 hours to get her down. She's been having nightmares. Nightmares. My 6-year-old daughter was having nightmares because her father chose 15 minutes of feeling important over her entire sense of security. Sarah, I don't. She held her hand. Whatever gonna say, just don't. I can't do this anymore. I can't keep having conversations about guilt while I'm trying to hold our daughter together. Our daughter. Not my daughter. Our daughter. Because even though I'd thrown away my right to be part of this family, Emma would always connect us. Is she okay? Really okay? Sarah was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. She wet the bed 3 times last week. She hasn't done that since she was 3. She asks me every day if it's her fault left. She thinks if she'd been a better daughter would have stayed. I wanted to right there on her doorstep. Tell her. I tell her every day that mommy and daddy's problems have nothing to do with her. But she's 6, Mark. She doesn't understand complicated. She understands that her daddy used to live here and now he doesn't. Sarah started to close the door, then stopped. She still sets a place for at dinner sometimes. Puts out favorite cup. When I ask her why, she says maybe I'll come home if she's ready for. The door closed with a soft click. I sat in my car in the parking lot for 3 hours, crying harder than I had since my father's funeral. My daughter was setting a place for me at dinner, hoping I'd come home. Still believing, despite everything, that her daddy might walk through the door and make everything normal again. But I couldn't go home. Because home wasn't a place anymore. It was the feeling of being trusted by two people who loved me unconditionally, and I'd burned that to the ground for someone who forgot my name the day I stopped showing. Work became my escape. I took on extra shifts, extra rotes, anything to avoid the silence of my studio apartment. My supervisor noticed, "We're working too much, Mark. When's the last time took a day off?" I couldn't remember. "I need the money." "For what?" "Child support." I nodded. It was easier than explaining that I was working to, because stopping meant thinking about what I'd done. Meant facing the fact that I'd become exactly what I'd hated about my mother, someone who put their own comfort above a child's well-being. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd resented my mother for choosing her stepchildren over me. Then turned around and chose a stranger over my own daughter. Last month I ran into Jessica at a coffee shop downtown. She was with a man I'd never seen before. Laughing at something he'd said, her hand on his arm the same way it had been on mine. She saw me and waved like we were old friends, like she hadn't been part of the reason my daughter cries herself to sleep. I left without ordering. That night I wrote Emma a letter, told her how much I loved her, how proud I was of her, how none of this was her fault, how she was the best thing I'd ever done with even though I'd done everything else wrong. I gave it to Sarah at the next custody exchange. "What's this?" "A letter for Emma, for when she's older, when she can understand." Sarah looked at the envelope like it might. "Understand what?" "That I'm sorry, that I love her, that leaving her was the biggest mistake of my pie. Didn't leave her, Mark. Left us. There's a difference." But there wasn't a difference, not to Emma, not to a 6-year-old who measures love by presents, by bedtime stories, by someone being there when she wakes scared in the middle of the night. Emma came running out of the apartment then, backpack bouncing against her shoulders. "Daddy." For a moment she was my little girl again. The one who used to into my arms when I came home from work. The one who believed her daddy could fix anything. Then she stopped herself. Became careful again. "Daddy." "Hi baby. Ready for our weekend?" She nodded and climbed into my car without the excitement she used to have. Without the chatter about what we might do together. We went to the park. The same one where I'd taught her to swing, where she'd fallen off the bars and I'd her scrapped knee better. She played alone while I sat on the bench, watching other fathers push their children on swings, lift them to the bars, catch them at the bottom of the slide. Fathers who went home to the same house as their children. Fathers who didn't have to pack their daughter's favorite stuffed animals into overnight bags. Fathers who were part of their children's daily lives instead of weekend visitors. "Daddy." Emma was standing in front of me, holding a dandelion she'd picked. "What is it, sweetheart? Air sad?" The question caught me off guard. I'd been trying so hard to be upbeat during our visits, to make our limited time together feel normal. Little bit baby. But not because of, never because of pie. She climbed onto the bench next to me still holding her dandelion. "Mummy says when people make big mistakes sometimes they can't fix them." "Is that what happened?" Out of the mouths of my 6-year-old daughter understood something it had taken me months to accept. "Yes, Em, that's exactly what happened. Duke could fix it. Every single day." She was quiet for a moment, spinning the dandelion between her fingers. Me too, and there it was. The truth I'd been avoiding. Emma wasn't just confused she was grieving. Grieving the family we used to be. Grieving the father I used to be. Grieving a that felt safe and whole and predictable. She was 6 years old and she was grieving, and it was my fault. That night, after I dropped her off and watched her disappear into the apartment that used to be ours, I sat in my car and made a decision. I couldn't fix what I'd broken. Couldn't undo the choices that had cost me everything that mattered. Couldn't go back and be the man my family deserved. But I could make sure Emma knew she was loved. Even if she couldn't understand why her father had to love her from a distance. I drove to the store and bought a notebook. Started writing her letters. One for every birthday she'd have without me living in the same house. One for her first day of middle school. One for when she graduated high school. One for her wedding day, if she ever forgave me enough to invite me. Letters to explain what I couldn't explain to a 6-year-old. That sometimes people make choices that destroy the very things they're trying to protect. That love isn't always enough to overcome selfishness. That heroes in real sometimes turn out to be the villains of their own stories. It's been 8 months since I became the man who abandoned his family for 15 minutes of feeling wanted by someone who didn't even matter. 8 months of learning that some consequences last forever. And that the hardest part about destroying isn't living with what lost. It's living with what become the kind of father whose daughter has to cross him out of her drawings because even in her imagination, families are better off without him.